My name's Rick Lief, and I'm the Vice Chairman of the Master Planning Committee. I'd like to welcome you and thank you all very much for coming to our second public meeting to talk about the progress of the Northborough Master Plan. At the first meeting, which we had over at the Milliken Middle School a couple of months ago, we sort of gave an overview of what the planning process is going to look like. We talked a lot about the baseline conditions of the town of Northborough. We split up into groups and talked a lot about ideas that people had for the different elements of the plan. We also had places where people, when they first came in, kind of chose topics of importance and then wrote down on the way out comments about what their vision for the town was, and a lot of that information was taken back, and the committee has worked with our consultants from VHB to sort of integrate that into the plan. I think you'll see in the goals we're going to discuss tonight, a lot of that information that came from that first meeting was incorporated into the goals we're going to talk about tonight. And that's kind of the purpose of tonight's meeting, is to talk about the goals that have been developed. The goals are somewhat at a high level, but the idea is we're going to break up at some point into groups and kind of go over the goals and talk about what we think about them. Are they complete? Should they be modified? And the goals are kind of at a high level, but there's also going to be action items or recommendations below each goal, and we might have some time to get into that at each table tonight also. So the people from VHB tonight are going to spend some time and talk about the difference between goals and recommendations, kind of update us on where the plan stands, and most of tonight we're going to break out into tables and kind of work through the goals. So that's the agenda for tonight, and with that I'll turn it over to Donnie from VHB, and he'll take us forward.
Thank you, Rick, very much. So we do have this presentation up front. I won't stand in front of it, but if you have a hard time seeing it, please feel free to come up and take a closer look. We did hand out the agenda. Hopefully all of you have the agenda. If you don't have the agenda, you probably don't have a clicker, and that clicker is incredibly important because we're going to do an interactive poll in just a moment. But the agenda is on the front page, and then the goals and the vision statement are on the following pages. So you can follow along during the presentation and during your discussion groups with that readily available information. So the agenda tonight, we do want to give you an overview of the project, where we are, where we are in the schedule. We do want to have that interactive polling exercise. We want to understand who's here tonight, who's participating. We have an update on the community surveys, the first community survey and now the second community survey that's active. The presentation of the draft vision and goals, and then we want to get right into the discussion because we want your feedback and we want everything down in writing so we can take it back to the office and distill it and, as Rick said, modify the vision and modify the goals as appropriate. So with regard to the project schedule and the updates, Rick did a good job of summarizing where we're at. The last public meeting we held in June at the middle school, and we presented some preliminary baseline data. We've synthesized that baseline data. We've built it out. We've provided the steering committee with a narrative, with chapters, element by element. They've reviewed the baseline. They provided wonderful notes, and we're in the process of synthesizing those notes, revising the baseline analysis, and that baseline analysis will be the foundational components of the master plan moving forward. So as you see in the schedule here, we are in the 6th or 7th month of our process. We still anticipate about a 12-month process. We are currently in the second public forum, and we're still going through and drafting the plan elements. So as I said, the baseline analysis is a good foundational component of the baseline of the master plan report, and that's going to be followed by the finalization of the vision and finalization of the goals, and that'll lead to the recommendations and the implementation plan. So if everybody has their clickers, so we want to do a little bit of an icebreaker, and again, these questions are all about understanding who's here tonight. So this is a silly little question that just to get you acquainted with your clickers if you haven't participated during the first public meeting. So if you could be one superhero, which superhero would you be? Batman is A, B, Superman, C, Captain America, D, Storm, E, Spider-Man, and F, Wonder Woman. Male and female superheroes. Okay. Wonder Woman. Very interesting crowd. Okay, so does everybody have a feel of it? All right. I promise there aren't the 17 questions that we had during the first public meeting. Very short, very sweet. Next one. Are you a resident or local business owner? And that's of Northborough. A, resident. B, local business owner. C, you're a resident and a local business owner. Or D, neither. Okay. I'll close it out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, that makes sense. How long have you lived in Northborough? A, less than 2 years, B, 2 to 5 years, C, 6 to 10 years, D, 11 to 15 years, E, 16 plus years, or you're not a resident at all, F. Closing it out in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wow. So we have some long-standing residents. What voting precinct do you live in? A, Precinct 1, B, Precinct 2, C, Precinct 3, D, Precinct 4, and then E, I'm not a resident. Closing it out in 5. Yeah, sure.
On this, what's the total number
On,
of people voting?
I think we're at, what are we at, about 30 people here? I don't know if we quite hit 30 yet, but that's approximate. So I'm going to close it out. All right, Precinct 3. Do you work in Northborough? A, yes, B, no. So closing it out. No, you don't work in Northborough, the majority. Do you have school-aged children? A, yes, 5 years or younger. B, yes, 6 to 12 years. C, yes, 13 to 18 years. D, yes, you have children of various ages. And E, I do not have school-aged children. Closing it out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. I do not have school-aged children. Wow. Let's see if that corresponds to the next question. Are you 65 years or older? A, yes. B, no. Closing out in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Majority 65 years or older. Okay, thank you for your participation. We want to get into the vision and the goals now. So the vision statement that we've come up with and the goals that we've come up with are the culmination of a process that we've been going through for the last 6, 7 months. Through the collection of baseline data, through the first public meeting where we had a visioning exercise, an issues and opportunities exercise. We've been to town meetings. We've been to the Apple Fest where we got a lot of input. We've had bi-weekly calls with steering committee representation, and we've had several steering committee meetings with the entire committee where we've gone over the baseline data, the issues and opportunities that we've been hearing, getting their feedback, ground truthing some of the things that we've been hearing, and we had that first public survey as well. So all of that information has been going into this vision statement and the following goals. So you all, as I said earlier, have this material in front of you, but it is a lot of words on this board right now, so if I may just take the opportunity to read it in its entirety. I won't do this for all of the goals, but the vision statement being sort of the top of the pyramid, if you will, is important to just note. So Northborough, a New England town incorporated in 1766, envisions a future where residents and visitors are drawn to a thriving downtown that provides walkability and connectivity between open spaces, gathering spaces, commercial activity, and neighborhoods, where Northborough's open spaces, natural features, recreational amenities, and historic sites are preserved and integrated into the community to welcome, educate, and inspire, where a well-balanced housing stock supports longstanding residents and new arrivals alike, where increased economic activity is given an appropriate place to grow, and support our community and residents, and where future environmental and fiscal changes are given consideration in planning for a more sustainable and resilient community. So you all have an opportunity to talk about that in your breakout sessions. Now that is a high-level directive for the master plan. To get to that vision, we have established goals for each of the different elements. So for land use, for example, the first goal that we've identified is prioritize the preservation of natural and open spaces while still accommodating the social and economic needs of the community. We also have enhanced downtown by creating a pleasing, welcoming, and cohesive appearance, enabling it to become the community's proud central gathering place for residents and visitors alike. So you'll note that the vision statement was very high level, very vague, but provided some level of direction. The goals get a little bit more specific, but they're not meant to be specific. The specificity in what you guys want to see, the actions on the ground to achieve the goals, to achieve the vision, that's going to come in the recommendations. So we provided a couple of recommendations for the goals. So for example, conduct a cost of community services study to promote the value of open space and natural lands. Identify flood hazards, for example, stormwater, inundation, riverine flooding, and utilize land use planning tools to discourage development in these areas. Plan for mixed uses in downtown that promote and support walkability. Support beautification efforts in downtown through increased gardening and landscaping. And you can look to the Garden Club for that as a potential partner. Something like that would be incorporated into the implementation plan. Promote the development and protection of green infrastructure within downtown. So you can see the hierarchy here. So the vision is a very vague, it's a statement of directive. The goals contribute to the vision, and the recommendations contribute to the goals, and then ultimately to the vision. So I won't read all of the goals here. You guys have those in front of you. But we do want to get you talking and participating. So you see we have all of the different goals and elements, goals by element, and again, those are on your agenda packets, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. But I'd want to give an update on the first community survey. We had a tremendous outpouring of participation. Almost 560 surveys, responses were received. We had a combination of the online survey, and then we went out to the senior center, and they had some hard copy surveys that were delivered to us that we inputted into the software as well. The results of the survey will be posted. We just inputted some of the last remaining hard copy surveys. So we do want to post the results of the survey to be transparent on the public website, and that's going to be the northboroughmp.com website, so you'll see the results up there shortly. We do have a second community survey, and all of that is dedicated to the vision and to the goals. So we want to, like tonight, we want to get valuable input from the community on whether or not the vision makes sense, it's giving the town the right direction that you feel that the town should go in. We want to make sure that the goals are correctly capturing your thoughts and feelings on the different master plan elements, and that they capture the right aspects of town, and they all contribute to the overall vision. We have 192 responses thus far, and it's been open since about Applefest. We wanted to make sure the survey was up there prior to the commencement of that event. And then the website for the survey is listed here, but it's also in your agenda packet. Sorry. So what we're going to do is there are group numbers on the bottom of your pamphlets, the first agenda packets on the bottom right-hand corner. It looks like we have about 30 people, so Jeffrey, do you want to? Okay.
So what we're going to do for tonight in terms of the breakout tables, as Donnie mentioned, he mentioned in the bottom right you have table numbers. So given the size of the turnout for tonight, what we're thinking we're going to do is rather than have 8 breakout tables, we're going to have 4. And what we'd like to do is combine groups number 1 and number 2 together. So if you have a number 1 or number 2, you're going to be coming up to the table here. And every single one of these flip charts have the group numbers on them. So if you come up here, group number 1 will be to my left. We're going to combine groups 3 and 4. And they're going to be located at number 4 so that we have a little bit of space between the groups. So number 4 is in the way back on my left. Groups 5 and 6 are going to be located at station 5, which is right up here in the front of the room, again, to get some more space between the teams. And then groups 7 and 8 are going to be back at table number 8, which is way in the back by Nicole, in the back corner there as well. And then in terms of the logistics for tonight. Okay, so we really tried to program this so there's as much conversation as possible. So when you get into your tables, if you could obviously quickly introduce yourselves, then elect a person to help take some of the notes, and you'll see if the steering committee members could raise their hands real quick, just if I'm in the steering committee, you'll see one of these committee members join one of your tables, or maybe two of them at each of the tables there, to help facilitate with taking notes. What we'd like to do is maybe halfway through or towards the end, if you can elect a spokesperson, because we're going to spend later tonight, you're reporting back to us about what your table talked about. And then remember, it's really important to let everybody have a chance to talk in these sessions, because the more that we can jot down and hear different perspectives, we're going to try to synthesize this as well. And lastly, and most importantly, have a lot of fun. We learn a lot. Hopefully you'll learn a lot as well, and we'll go from there. In terms of logistics, really what we're trying to have you do tonight, there's several levels of things to talk about. So Donnie went through the goals, and everybody has the goals in your handout. So hopefully everyone has a copy of it verbatim in your handout. Where we are with the committee is they've really just been focusing on the high-level goals. So we haven't even gotten into recommendations yet. So tonight is really about confirming the goals. Have we missed a goal? Do you like the goals? Do we want to wordsmith the goals? And what we're going to do is spend 10 minutes on each of the chapters that go in the plan, so like land use, housing, economic development, talking about the goals, see if you like them. And on the flip charts that are up on the easels, we'll be taking notes about each of those pieces. Let's talk about land use, what you like, what don't you like. And then if you have a little bit of time in each of these sessions, and we predict that you will, you can start to get into some recommendations. So for example, if you like land use goal number 1, how do you start to think about implementing it? What are the projects? What are the things that the town should do just to start to get that conversation going? What we'll do is we'll give you a little warning notice. Every 10 minutes we'll move on from chapter to chapter. We have got 7 of them to go through tonight. And then what we'll leave is like the last half hour for us to come back and to report back from each of the groups about the major things that you talked about. Clearly we can't go through all of them, but some of the highlights for each of those elements that we talked about as well. And what we'll do is we'll guide you through those 7 parts of the plans, again, 10 minutes on each of these. And then hopefully we'll have a lot of fun and conversation. But remember, goals will be up on the top and we'll critique those. Recommendations will go on the flip charts on the table there. It's okay if we talk macro and micro. What we'll do with the committee is try to go through and really get these next rounds revised in terms of revisions to the goals and dig into more recommendations as well. So why don't we divide up? And if we have committee members, if you kind of self-select to different tables, do a quick introduction, and then we'll get started. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, I think, up over here. Is it over this one? Okay, we're going to go to this group over here. And what we're asking everybody to do, and I think everyone's got this, is we can pick any of the 3 goals that you've talked about. And keep in mind that we're going to type up everything that you've talked about tonight, so we'll make sure we document everything. But we thought it might be interesting for all the tables to hear a little bit about what each other has talked about. And we had a lot of fun roaming around and listening in, and actually there's some commonality and some pretty big differences between the tables. So pick the top 3 goals, a little bit of report back on what you talked about, and a couple of recommendations that you might think is interesting for everybody to hear as well. So let's start over here. Rick, I think you're going to report back.
We had a hard time staying on goals and not on actual recommendation about what to do about goals. But interesting enough, a couple of things came up that we thought might be missing or need to be brought out somehow in the goals better. There was this whole talk about that Northborough is really a bedroom community, and we need to get people to engage somehow into the community more actively, not just sort of come here and live here and then, leave to go back to their jobs kinds of things. We talked about from a technology standpoint, there wasn't a lot in the goals around technology infrastructure, how that could be expanded, how the town could enable that, and through technology infrastructure, but there could be a way to get people to engage more in what's going on in the town. So we thought that in general we had to maybe spend a little more time and think about the whole concept of technology and technology infrastructure and what the master plan, what to say about that, and this idea about engagement of people with the community. We also talked about this concept of, we talk about in land use 3, maintaining a small town feel, but what does that actually mean, a small town? How do we compare it to other small towns? There's some discussion around the table about, is Hudson a good idea of a small town where Hudson has developed a viable town center that people go to and use the facilities there that Northborough doesn't do, and what's the difference between the towns. And so maybe some more thought has to be given into the definition of exactly what does a small town mean. We also had a lot of talk about downtown and maybe revisiting, although this is more of a recommendation, but where should the downtown actually be? Are we saying that we say downtown, it means the current downtown, or could downtown mean some repositioned downtown someplace else in town? So those were, along with the goals, some of the main things that we talked about. In terms of some recommendations, under open space and recreation, things came up around increased lighting for fields, turf fields, the idea of reestablishing a town beach somewhere in town that we used to have but don't have anymore could be a benefit to the town. We also talked about in the schools, our schools right now, our elementary schools are neighborhood-based schools. A lot of towns are looking at grade-based schools as opposed to neighborhood-based schools. And do we want to mention anything in the plan about the ability to take a look at the pros and cons of neighborhood schools versus grade-based schools? Under transportation, one thing we thought we wanted to add, especially if we're going to develop more walking and pedestrian areas, was also street crossings. How do we manage safe and effective street crossings across the street? And once again, we talked about transportation to the Westboro train station is an important thing we want to do under transportation. So those are some general ideas.
All right, great. How about a round of applause for this group over here in the corner? Thank you very much. So those are some good ideas. Where should we go next, Donnie? We're over here in the corner. All right, so who do we have for a spokesperson? Chris?
Okay. So the one thing that was a consistent theme through much of our discussion was around, we felt education wasn't necessarily
Do you know who's going to speak for you guys?
well represented in, there were some goals around education, but we felt that certainly for my situation and others, as a primary motivator for coming to the town in the first place. I've been here 20 years, and I know at least 4 or 5 other families that have moved here from Marlborough specifically because of the schools. And so, we felt that should be more prominent in the vision statement, and maybe just in general in a lot of the goals here. For land use, and maybe it's more of a general comment as well, we thought as we were looking through all of these goals, it might be worth looking at who do we think does a really good job of land use, housing, etc. What other towns are models that we could base our goals on, not necessarily just doing the same thing, but using the way that they describe what they've done, the outcomes they've got to, and then using that as a starting point and then tweak it based on our personality of what we want our community to be. So rather than start with a clean sheet of paper, let's find models in other communities that do a great job in each of these areas, understand how they describe what they've done, and then use that as a framework for then modifying that based on our communities. In housing, a consistent theme was affordable downsizing options for seniors, incorporating ease of access in those facilities, and an emphasis on moderate sizing and moderate pricing. Economic development, there was a lot of robust discussion around effective parking and walkability, trying to create incentives for commercial properties that are currently paying taxes but are abandoned, so they're kind of eyesores to some degree. How could we put incentives in place so that those become beautified in some form or fashion? But having effective revamping properties, revamping some of these commercial spaces without effective parking, we thought was something that those two things need to go hand in hand. So parking and walkability was something that cropped up in the economic development discussions on a consistent basis. Yeah, there's a bunch of other stuff, but those are the top ones that we came up with if we had to pick 3.
Recommendations at all, or what you already talked about? This is really kind of your recommendations. I think
Yeah.
we were pretty good with the goals, a few minor tweaks, that's it.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right, well, how about a round of applause for this group too, please? And I like that. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. And I think the comment that you didn't hear over here was just, in general, I think you guys felt that you were pretty good with the goals, so you quickly focused on some specific recommendations as well. I think one of the common themes that I heard between the two groups was this idea of wordsmith things so you can become more specific to Northborough and really try to be a little bit more targeted as we go through this, and then maybe some of the recommendations will follow suit. So clarifications, I think, was a theme up here as well. So Donnie, you want to go
Sure.
next?
And I also think I heard you guys talk about zombies too, which is quite important. All right.
So I'm going to start by critiquing the vision statement. And I think our group had a couple of recommendations. One, the second line talks about a thriving downtown. And our group felt that there was too much emphasis on the downtown. We want to just talk about maybe drawn to a thriving and diverse community. Not a downtown, but to a community. So those are I think, our chief criticisms of the draft vision statement. And as a general comment, it's still too long. I know it was longer and it's been shortened. Still too long, should be a shorter statement. As far as some of the issues that we got into, we were all over the place, as I guess everybody else was too. For land use, we kind of, that back and forth between land use and open space, I think it's pretty much everybody was enthusiastic about that. We got a good education that there is a community, an open space committee that is constantly seeking opportunities to acquire more open space for the purposes of the town. One of the recommendations was to look for easements. If you can't actually buy the land, maybe you can get an easement through it. So that's probably a recommendation as opposed to a goal. Again, in the land use, we're talking about the downtown. And one of the things that came up in our group was, what is the downtown? Where is it? And does it need to move? The so-called downtown that everybody would have identified 30 years ago is now abandoned buildings, gas stations. It's not walkable. There's no parking. It's not much of a downtown. So maybe we need to think about shifting our emphasis either east or west, doing something a little bit different in our thinking. As far as housing, again, the question is, what do you do when you're elderly and you're on a fixed income? It was pointed out before we got started. Are there options for you to live if you're just graduating from school? Where can you go? Northborough has to make sure we accommodate people like that. Economic development, we didn't really have a whole lot to say in there. Natural, cultural, and historical. Again, back to the open space and how important that was. As far as open space and recreation, one of the things that was emphasized here is the cultural emphasis in the town and how important it would be to have more of an emphasis on cultural things, more opportunities for cultural events where, let's face it, sports are king in this town, so that all the fields and all the facilities are used for sports. But how about for cultural uses? Maybe we could designate either an area in town, small, maybe once or twice a month, where it's not being used for sports, but it's used for cultural events. And in line with that, what about storage facilities for various groups in town? Where do they store their stuff? Can the town provide some of that stuff for the cultural side of things? Unfortunately, we didn't get into public facilities and services as much as we wanted to. So that's a big problem on this table. We're so enthused about all the other topics, we just didn't get to it. Transportation, we want to see if we can maybe get a few more sidewalks in town, make it a little more walkable.
Great, thank you. And I think I heard you guys talk about diversity too in terms of culture. So,
one other point, and that's education. We wanted to emphasize education a little bit more in the draft statement there.
okay, thank you. How about a round of applause for them?
So who did we pick over here?
All right, so I think a lot of what we thought was needed here has already been covered, but I'll mention a couple of things. We felt, we should remove the idea about trying to achieve a small town feel because we're kind of past that. A couple more things. On affordable housing, removing a part about keeping it 10% because that is the law, so we didn't really need to state it. Although some felt that achieving a thriving, walkable downtown was a pipe dream, we felt one way to potentially achieve it is to really connect the local business owners downtown to work together as a coalition or enable them somehow to come together to make it work for them. It was brought up a bunch, trying to find ways to incentivize redevelopment of abandoned buildings or gas stations, just to sort of beautify and revitalize downtown. And let's see. Certainly, increasing walkability was brought up. Sidewalks were mentioned as being a top priority, and that everyone at this table felt they would pay. They would pay increased taxes to get more sidewalks and safer sidewalks and sidewalks for children to get to and from school. Downtown parking was also a top priority, and finding a way for the town to acquire a public facility for downtown public parking. And generally about education, it was felt that maybe this plan isn't the place to talk about education exactly, but definitely it should be included in the plan how to provide for school-aged children throughout the plan. So including that age group in our thinking and discussion around the plan. And then in terms of recommendations, I think I mentioned some, but the downtown parking, sidewalks, and was there any others? Those were the top. Yeah. Oh, and right, and it was covered, but transportation and getting, finding a way to get into Boston, connecting with other transportation, and getting to the commuter rail. So.
Awesome, great, thank you. How about a round of applause for the last group? Okay, on behalf of the consultants, we just want to thank you. I know we kept you a little bit longer. We have just a couple of more things. In terms of next steps, we're going to be distilling all of this information, typing it up, incorporating some modifications to the vision statement into the goals. We also are going to finalize the baseline analysis, prepare a comprehensive list of recommendations based on your feedback and based on our professional experience and based on things that have been working on in other towns. Some folks have mentioned Hudson, some folks mentioned other towns in the area, looking to those towns for best practices. And then once that is done, and we'll come back to you folks to present those recommendations and an early implementation plan. Please don't forget to go to the survey, take the survey. Everything that has been said here is going to be incorporated, but showing a good sample of, demonstrating a good sample in terms of that survey is important too. And Jeffrey, did you have anything? And then I'm just going to hand it off to Rick, who's going to close it out. But on behalf of the consultants, thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for coming tonight on behalf of the committee. This is really important feedback that we're getting. There will be a third public meeting. We'll find out time to schedule that. In the meantime, as they mentioned here, Northborough masterplan.com is a great way to stay connected to what's going on. We also have a number of steering committee meetings between now and then. The next one is on the 1st of November, and those are public meetings. Agendas will be posted, but you're always welcome to come to those and hear what the committee is discussing also. But the main thing is we really appreciate you all coming out tonight. Thanks very much, and we'll see you at the next public meeting.